Welcome to Top of Mind. My name is Jon Davids here at Influicity, and this is the video series where I speak to interesting and influential people across the media and entertainment landscape. And today I'm joined by a very special guest, Valeria Mares, the head of content for Wavemaker. Now, Wavemaker is a massive marketing agency, and she's the head of content, which means that she is at the very epicenter of the shift from traditional advertising to content marketing, which is happening more and more every day. So when you see product placements popping up on social media, television, movies, music, her team is at the center of it all. If you're a regular viewer of our content, thanks for joining me again. If you're new here, Influicity works with brands and agencies across influencer marketing, podcasts, and emerging platforms. Our research and our content is totally free. All we ask is that if you enjoy content like this, go ahead and share it with a colleague or post it on social media. We really appreciate it. Okay, let's get to my interview with Valeria. The first question I asked her today was where she thinks we are on the shift from traditional advertising to content marketing. Take a look.
I will just start saying that there is not a media plan that doesn't include content. And I hope that this is, a pretty powerful and straightforward answer. So definitely content marketing and brand funded content or branded content, call it however you want, whatever you want, is the new fashion. And this is because it's due to different reasons and variables, from one side, let's say the impact of effectiveness of advertising is, I don't want to say less effective or losing, its strength, but I mean, we're seeing definitely incredible engagement when it comes to developing relevant content to audiences. And this is what people are looking for today. So streaming platform incredibly boomed over the pandemic. People are looking for content for entertainment, are looking to be entertained. And sometimes, an ad that is trying to push a product is not necessarily only, that relevant content that people are looking for. And that's why, and here comes the role of content that is really, feed the overall communication plan with that relevancy and engagement, intimacy, emotional impact that brands are looking for today to grow from a brand and brand health perspective, but also from a business perspective.
Right. And what percentage, and maybe you've seen this shift over the last few years, but how much of the branded content takes place on traditional channels like linear television, for example, versus the social media channels or some of the newer media channels? Is it an even split, or is there is it one way or the other?
Here I will talk based on my experience, and I can tell that, working in content in a digital ecosystem is definitely easier. So the potential of integrations and the liberty that you can take, the freedom, creative aspects that are less, boundaries, less barriers, is more dynamic and also quicker if I can. So sometimes, when you work in linear, the overall, production timeline is a little bit more structured and less flexible. And digital gives us all the space to really build the world that we want to build and the communication ecosystem that we want to build.
Yeah, the speed for sure. There's going to be, you can actually develop something and get it into the market much quicker versus in linear television. I would imagine it takes a long time to see it to fruition.
Yeah, it might be longer. As I was saying, it's also, if you think about the production ecosystem, in the linear world is much more like multi-layer, sophisticated, so many stakeholders, right? It's just a little bit more complicated. Not like we can make that, of course, for sure. We're also there, but looking at the overall practice, I definitely see a trend and a stronger growth in the digital world. Definitely.
Yeah. So how much of what you see is sort of part of the influencer economy and being done by the YouTubers and the TikTokers? Are you seeing more and more work being done there, or is there still the majority happening with the established production and media companies?
So I can also tell that, and I'm pretty positive on this, that if there is content in any media plan, there is social influencer marketing in every media plan. So social influencer marketing has become literally a channel that we also quantify, analyze, put in our tools, estimated impressions and average CPMs or whatever it is, literally, like we're putting that media rigor that any other channel deserves. And this is why there is demand, there is adoption, and it's becoming part of our practice, to the point that it's not only necessarily the content team, that take over and leads this kind of programs that are fascinating and great and incredibly creative, but planning leaders, definitely work directly with social influencer marketing. As I was saying, in a media agency, has become really a common practice.
Right. So are you seeing any platforms? I'll ask you about some specifics in a moment, but when we talk about, let's say, TikTok or Instagram or Snapchat, does any platform rise to the top today as the place where most clients want to be?
So I think that, well, TikTok is a new fashion for sure. It's also the newest one, right? But that is what happened, right? You have a moment of launch, becomes a new fashion, and then it starts to settle down and become part of the common practice. So right now, being TikTok, the latest one, there's been a lot of interest and attention in that, and also a lot of attention, I would say, in all those more rigorous aspects and important aspects, like how do we target on that platforms, the brand safety aspect. So right now, of course, like that partner is assessing all these aspects, and Group M is also part of these conversations for sure. But I would say that it's definitely, right now is on the urge and has become, kind of the new fashion, the new thing that clients, want to see in their plans.
Yeah, TikTok for sure. It's on everybody's mind. And the interesting thing about TikTok as well, obviously, it's a new platform, big audience, and they got a phenomenal algorithm. But the interesting thing I find also is that the form factor, the types of content that you create are very distinct on TikTok. It doesn't look like other platforms. Did you ever have a challenge, or your brand's challenged to create content that looks like TikTok content? Are they trying to put, like traditional video onto TikTok?
Well, the truth is that we're exactly educating clients to create content that is endemic to each platform. So it doesn't really make sense to try to force things and force channels, right? And to be authentic and relevant to people, we need to be, to create endemic content, as I was saying, endemic to the platform. So yes, it happened in the beginning, but the truth is that more and more I see this fluidity and openness also from, the client side, in really, letting the platform speak for itself and letting us create what needs to be created on each platform. You also address another interesting thing that is about a difference among platforms, right? Right now, like we've seen the evolution of features, right? And like what can be done on one platform and what can be done on the other platform. I think that what I personally and professionally curious in better understanding the future, what is going to be the role of each social platform, from a consumer journey perspective, or, a day in the life perspective, but also from if I was a client in my category, what's the role of each platform, right? And what influencers should say in each platform based on how it is endemically used by people and by the final users, right? And I think that that's an interesting territory to think about for the future, because it's where the different platforms are competing against each other. It's gonna become a fight. Still, TikTok is pretty unique, I would say, but little by little they're blurring, right? And I think that just, as a professional in this space, it's an interesting thought and territory to think about for the future.
Yeah, and it's also, just to expand on that, you see a lot of copycat behavior on social platforms. So Snapchat launched a feature, Instagram copies it, LinkedIn launched LinkedIn Stories. It's now retired LinkedIn Stories, but there's definitely a tendency to copycat features that win, although there's a mixed record on how successful those platforms are when they copy another platform's product.
I agree, but what's the answer? Consumers and users are the answer, right? Are the truth. So you need to see how it's going to cement and how the adoption is going to cement, right? And settle down at a certain point. And users, right, will tell us the truth and will tell us what works, which copycat works or not. And if it's perceived as a copycat, and that will go back, to the original one that first launched a feature or not. So that's why I think that it's very interesting from a human anthropological perspective, if you will, like because we will see how behaviors, right, take shape and will shape the platforms themselves.
Yeah. So one platform that's done actually a very good job at, I don't want to say copying, but borrowing ideas from others is Instagram. They did that with Instagram stories, of course, Instagram Reels, IGTV. What is the popularity? There was a point, I would say, in the last 2-3 years where Instagram was the biggest, everybody wanted to be on Instagram. And I'm not sure if that's still the case or if other platforms have taken over. So what's the interest level in Instagram today? Do clients want to be there?
I think that it's gonna, it is, and it will be part of our common practice. Again, like when you talk about social channels like Facebook and Instagram are very possibly the baseline. I'm also very interested in experimenting and opening a little bit, our radar to understand where new audiences are moving. But I will never and never recommend to do one thing or the other. I will always recommend to try and test and pilot, right? And audiences are still on Instagram, will be on Instagram very possibly. But again, like it's our job to understand why and when it's relevant to use Instagram and which brand have more right to win on Instagram based on their behavior on Instagram, right?
Yeah. The other platform that has, I think, it was very popular, it took a little dip, and now it seems like it's more popular than ever, is Snapchat. I know, speaking to my my nieces who are 12 and 13 years old, Snapchat for messaging is like all they use, and they're on there all the time. I guess, where do you see Snapchat in the planning? Is it right for certain brands?
So listen, I'm seeing a lot of interesting things on Snapchat, and yes, we saw exactly this trend, right? Up and down, and then up again. And what I'm understanding is that well, first of all, from a user's behavior, a very interesting thing is that we're understanding that it works very good on intimate communities. So like a typical characteristic of of this platform is that it really works to connect a closer group of friends together that, keep the communication open all day long. And I think that this is very interesting for those brands that want to create a very intimate relationship with small communities, with multiple small communities. This is, first of all, a very interesting thing. Then I've also seen very interesting on certain accounts and categories, incredible ROI results that we wouldn't even think about, but it converts and sells. So that means very possibly that if you're very relevant on those communities, and you're building and you're creating endemic content, those communities react very well, right? And another thing that I think is very interesting about Snap is and proposals and projects that I've seen is about starting to use the platform for kind of like long form content, if you will. Like I've seen, also in partnership with some publisher and editors, the possibility to start to create kind of mini series and shows, and makes totally sense if they're thought for those, circles and close community and intimate communities that are, that share a common passion for something. So it's a platform that is very interesting, both from a human perspective and from a performance perspective overall, thinking about, the entire funnel.
And going back to what you were saying earlier, you have to find the right brand fit for that platform. They're not all going to work for everybody.
This is true for every platform, I think.
Yeah.
So if we think about Instagram, right, that is the world of beautiful pictures, right? If you are not a brand that speaks that beautiful language with that, imagery, right, that is the right fit for the platform, there is no reason to be there, right? If you're not a brand that is on the other side open to have inclusive and fun conversations with the audience, maybe you don't go on TikTok. Right. Yeah. And if you don't play with yourselves and with augmented reality lenses, maybe you don't go on Snapchat. So I definitely believe that ultimately, the fit is double. From one side, how to connect with the audience, but at the same side, what's my right to speak on that platform based on my DNA as a brand?
Yeah, yeah. What about gaming? And I shouldn't even talk about gaming as a category, but Twitch as a platform, 1 billion users, lots of it's different because it's about live streaming, it's about real time, and you'll have channels on Twitch that are getting 50,000 concurrent views at one time. Do you think there's a place there for brands that are not necessarily gaming brands, but they want to reach a large audience of gamers because it's incredibly mainstream? Do you think about Twitch much in your planning?
Absolutely. But in fact, like when I talk to them, and I completely agree on that, they talk about themselves as an entertainment brand. And I couldn't agree more, because to me, like, gaming is an incredibly powerful territory to be tied to several different categories in industry, like from fashion to food, beverage, like CPG brands. Like, there are so many opportunities. Is again, a passion point, but that can be tied to so many categories and so many conversations, and topics of relevance. So I think that it's, again, but you need to be a brand in that case that is okay with tapping into those, fun and engaged communities, and knowing that maybe gaming come first, but I also want to wear the right sneakers, right? And if you're okay with that, that's great. It's gonna be a success. So it's again that fine line, between, the right to speak of the brand, how willing the brand is to speak on that platform, and the community that we're engaging there.
Mm-hmm. So I'm sure data is a big piece, of all your planning. You have to make sure that you're measuring and you're achieving certain outcomes. How do you balance top of funnel results like awareness and conversation and recall versus bottom of funnel, such as purchasing or registrations? I guess the first question I'll ask is, are brands more leaning towards top of funnel or bottom of funnel when they do content?
So usually and historically, and the history of content very possibly started with upper funnel, right? When we have these big keywords, right, that I try not to mention too much, but again, relevance, engagement, strengthening awareness with the right attributes, and expressing the DNA of the brand is all about brand positioning, right? And tapping into culture. So the upper funnel is really about, usually, like, is where content was born to help brands shape culture, right? That's the overall, like, I would say, preliminary thought. But more and more, and that's also the play that we're making as a media agency, is to try to tie culture to commerce. And so, for several reasons. Reason number one, that again, to me, is the truth, is because consumers' behaviors has changed. Our behavior has changed. People can not be aware of a brand, not know of a brand at all, find it on social media, and in 5 seconds have an order or like a purchase, right, in their cart. So like the overall commerce completely disrupted like the consumer journey that we like step by step, layer by layer of a funnel. Sometimes the entire loop can happen literally in few minutes, and we need to adapt to this, right? And this is why more and more, like we try to merge commerce element in any piece of content that we do. I always say, if it's shoppable, why not? So if we can add, shoppability, like a shoppable element in a content piece, why shouldn't we do that, right? It can be, again, a call to action, a link, a swipe up, whatever it is. And it's proven that works. As I was saying, if I see ROI on Snapchat, it proves that works. At the same time, we also had to set, I would say, the expectations. Because of course, like, and assign a primary role to each piece of content. So content is not commerce. There is another discipline, another department in the agency that perfectly take care of the performance layer of a media plan, an overall communication plan. So when I say to set expectation, we need to assign a primary role, right, to every piece of content, and then eventually weaving the shoppable elements. This is to say that I still feel that the majority of the content ecosystem is there to serve and accelerate the performances of the brand, but it's not necessarily there to have an immediate ROI and high volumes of ROI,
right,
in the short term.
Yeah, I think where brands get into trouble is when they see a campaign, for example, the Snapchat campaign you were talking about, where you get a lot of clicks and a lot of purchases, and then they start to compare that to a conversion campaign they might run on Google, and then you say, whoa, hold on a second. You can't compare us to that on a regular basis, because just because you had success this one time doesn't mean that you're going to shift and all of a sudden compare us to something else, because not every content campaign is going to achieve that.
It is correct. And in your previous question or initial question, you mentioned data. So the data points that we're buying and activating on each platform are different. When you're operating commerce, you're activating data points that reflect some kind of purchase and recent purchase. So that's why, that's what drives effectiveness, right? And efficacy. I'm buying audiences of shoppers, of people that are actively looking for products. This doesn't happen necessarily on social media. We can also do that, right? And we can also include social media, part of the social channels in these performance activations. But technically and usually when you're developing content and storytelling, we're not buying an audience of shoppers. We're buying an audience of people that we want to bring closer to the brand.
Right. So let's talk about podcasting. I'm wondering, what is the interest level, first of all, in podcasting today from a brand and content integration standpoint? And what are brands doing? What's an example of something a brand might do with a podcast?
All right. So again, podcast is like TikTok. So I've seen I don't know how many accounts I have active right now on, and clients interested really in the role of podcast. So audio overall and audio storytelling is the brand new thing. Both for traditional advertising. So the audio platforms are now part of our literally everyday planning, but also content integration, right? And again, because even if the world of podcast is pretty fragmented, is such an interesting world of intimate passions. And that's what drives, I would say, the interest of clients. We know that when you're listening to a podcast, you're actively listening to that podcast. Otherwise, you wouldn't, right? It's not that possible. It's a different dynamic and behavior from having a screen in the living room where everything's happening, right? So that intention of the user and attention is something that clients have definitely in their radar. The possibilities the possibilities are many, and we're doing, and I'm seeing projects that have a very different nature. It can become an integration. I tend to recommend a strong editorial integration that can be, literally create and be part of the creation of a section of a podcast for our audience, a branded section, usually sponsored, but then with relevant content, creating, in partnership with the brand, but for the audience. But it can also become something much more ambitious, like creating a full original that we know is more of an effort. But it's so interesting. And then at that point, if original is the interesting part of our work is to find the right distribution model to make it successful, right? So amplification and driving traffic and making people fall in love with that and making it a cult or a success.
Yeah. And are brands looking on podcasting in particular? Because when podcasting and podcast advertising started, it was very much about direct response. I'd imagine today, especially on the content side, it's probably less about direct response and more about positioning and relevance. Would that be correct?
It is correct. It is also correct to say that still there is an interruption of experience if you're driving people to buy. Right. Well, usually, when you follow an episode of a podcast, you just want to go to the end, and listen it all, right? And not necessarily switching, across multiple platforms. Still, I don't have data about the multitasking, during the podcast creation, but yeah, that is accurate. Let's say that, and the majority of the project I've overseen, I've been working on, and my team has been working on, is more about expanding the storytelling of the brand, explaining the culture of the company. So really, this more upper funnel / I would say culture and cultural elements, rather than buy me, even if there is also that component, and there is always a special offer for the premium audience of the podcast, right?
Yeah. So I want to finish off by asking you some high-level questions about the content industry and consumer habits in general. So we've just come off the pandemic. We're still in a pandemic, but people are getting back to a normal way of life in some ways. I'm wondering what you think about the movie experience, the big picture experience. Do you think people are sort of stuck in their ways now of streaming and being at home and being sort of in their own environments? Or do you think that communal experiences like movies or theater are things that we will get back to?
Everybody wants to get back to that, right? We're striving, like we want to meet people, we want to go out, and we want to have experiences in real life. So what I think is that, again, has similar to how it was addressing the evolution of social media. I think that through COVID, we learned a lot, and we learned that virtual is a reality and is here to stay. Everybody embraced it, and it completely disrupted our everyday behaviors, also from a content perspective, completely, right? And streaming on the urge. And but I do believe that theaters will reopen. I do believe in the relevance and importance of having real life experiences. And I just think that from a content perspective, it's an incredible opportunity, because like right now we'll have new cemented behaviors that will just overlay, right? And for us, it's just multiple channels, multiple possibilities to deliver our content. So I'm just very curious to see what's the evolution, what the evolution is going to look like. But I'm very positive that like movie theaters and the pleasure of the big screen and the silence and the dark room, like it's gonna be an incredible pleasure that we want to go back to.
Yeah. What's your take on big tech companies becoming what it seems like the biggest media companies? Obviously, Netflix is big. You have Apple TV doing a great job. Amazon continues to invest. Google, Alphabet. Where do you see the future? Do you think that these new media companies will be the places where people get their content, or do you see a place for the traditional media co's in the long-term future?
So I think that when it comes to broadcasting versus streaming, like it's a similar to what we were talking about for social media. Like there will be a lot of copycat and similarities. So right now, like from a consumer perspective, like how many streaming services and streaming platforms on average a user is like using? Many, right? And this is just gonna be more and more over time. And this is because traditional broadcasters are completely changing, and reshaping their business. Just think about, big ones. And I'm in Miami, so I think for sure about Univision, because there's a lot of talking about the company having them the hub here. But I just think that I keep on saying that it's more about the multiplication of opportunities, and it's going to be interesting to see how the market is going to settle at a certain point, how the market shares, are gonna work. Competition is crazy, incredible, and I also think that another interesting battle will be, and it's already taking place, and is also honestly affecting the overall publishing ecosystem and publisher ecosystem, are the production capabilities. So the capability to build, again, content that is cool, brilliant, and well done and relevant to people. So there is the battle, where the battle exists, and consumers will let us know again.
Yeah. And then my last question, we're heading into 2022. What would you be telling clients today? What are you telling clients today to look out for from a content perspective?
Yeah, so I think that there are two areas that are fast growing and possibly not developed as much as they should, but there are the big opportunities for the future. From one side, I think that what I define precision content, also known as addressable content, so the hyper personalization and hyper relevance of creative assets, is fundamental, and this can happen, and also through social influencer marketing, programmatic buying, but that hyper relevance of the campaign is fundamental. And for me, it's still content. And then the other huge trend that is also a business trend and a demand that I'm seeing is long form content and IPs. So more and more the storytelling gets longer. That is kind of like counterintuitive, if you will, because we all talk about snackable content. But the truth is that streaming platforms are telling us that people want to see shows and want to see movies, right? And docuseries, maybe just shorter episodes, right? But that's where the world is going. And that is where clients are asking for more, and we're also driving the practice. So I see literally, you know, these two areas. One is more tied to commerce, if you will, with this hyper relevancy of messages. And at the same time, the other one is more tied to culture, that is produce, you know, products that becomes IPs for the brand, completely ownable, and that help them really expand and extend their storytelling.
Well put. Okay, well, Valeria, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been very insightful.
Thank you so much. It's been fun.